At the national level, the U.S. Department of Education recently commissioned a study which is entitled A Crucible Moment. And the conclusion in that study is that we need to be educating our students beyond the professional skills. That we need to be educating our students to be involved in their community and to be civically engaged. And one of the recommendations in that study is that we need to give them professional challenges that involve the community and that are typically achieved by either action research or service learning. At the state level, Governor Patrick recently appointed a special commission on civic engagement and learning. And that special commission is charged with developing specific recommendations for how to strengthen the civic education of our K through 16 pipeline. Also at the state level, the Department of Higher Education has its vision goals, where what we're trying to do as a state is lead the country in educating our students. And they just added as one of their goals a measurable outcome in civic engagement. It is a very exciting time to be involved in civic engagement education. Now, I'll let President Corrett and Chancellor McCormick give you the specifics, but I want to give you the good news. The University of Massachusetts system, and UMass-Dartmouth in particular, are leading our nation when it comes to civic education. And the better news is, we plan to stay in the lead. Because we know that it makes meaningful differences in terms of our student learning and our community health and welfare. And so we're leading the nation, we're going to stay on the cutting edge. Now it gives me great pleasure to introduce probably the main reason why UMass-Dartmouth is on the cutting edge. Certainly a champion for community service, connecting with our community in meaningful ways, and service learning. She is the major reason why we at UMass-Dartmouth have a goal that every student will graduate with at least one service learning experience. What you may not know is that our center also organizes a lot of community service activities. And somehow, in her extremely busy schedule, Jean McCormick is with us to help harvest produce at the Y Farm, or sort clothing for less fortunate families at Gifts to Give. It gives me great pride and pleasure to introduce Chancellor Jean McCormick.
Thank you, Matt. I had a lot of fun with the vegetable stuff because, of course, our engineering students, they had a lot of squash to harvest, and they were carrying it down, and they said, no, we need a system line here. And they had that done in no time. I just followed directions about what I was supposed to do. Dear friends, welcome to the University of Massachusetts Dartmouth in this 4th annual Civic Engagement Summit. You know, as Matt said, a decade ago, UMass-Dartmouth embarked on a strategic plan that was called Engaged, Embedded, and Evolving. The notion that everyone in the campus, no matter what their role was, they had, from being a janitor to being the most prominent faculty member, should be in love with what they do, be engaged. And that we would do this work embedded in our community. We would not do things to our community or for our community, but with our community, because we would be so involved, we would know what it is that the community needed. And that process would make us change. It would make the community change, and it would make us change as an institution. And I'm proud to say that today's summit is just one manifestation of that mission, because it brings us all together to reflect and strengthen the social fabric of our community, our region, and the Commonwealth. You know, civic engagement is a collective process to improve the quality of life in our communities. And we're setting our learning, our research work in that concept. So today's dialogue, and it is meant to be a dialogue, is is one step in that process. And it's a step we take consciously to improve our communities. If our experience has taught us anything, it's the value of collaboration. Social networks that include people who trust and assist each other are really powerful assets. It's the way we get great things done. And these connections forged by collaborations hold us together and enable us to really serve our communities better. Matt mentioned something that we're very proud of. This year, UMass-Dartmouth was recognized as being one of the top 10 universities in the country by President Obama. We have been a community Carnegie engaged institution. We've been on the honor roll for the last 3 years, but we were among the top 10 in the nation as civically engaged campuses, and this didn't happen by accident. It's a testament to the strength of our community partnerships, the creativity of our faculty to design challenging learning experiences that benefit our community, and the resolve of our students to see those projects come to fruition. It's certainly a tribute to the people at the Center for Civic Engagement, to Matt Roy, to Deidre Haley, to John Quinn, who joined them recently to engage more of our graduate students in that. Matt reports that his team is able to document 179,000 hours of service performed by our students, our faculty. The independent sector, the National Coalition of Nonprofit and Corporate Giving Organizations, calculated that the average hour of service in Massachusetts is worth $26.84. So that adds up to $4.8 million in service that we provide to the community, and we do expect that number to top $5 million this year. 2/3 of the class of 2011 graduated with at least one service learning experience, and given the transformative nature of this pedagogy and the way that students vote with their feet to participate, we hope to make that 100% very soon. So I also wanted to invite you, if you have the opportunity, to join us for the dedication and naming of the Robert and Jean LeDuc Center for Civic Engagement. These two wonderful people gave a very generous gift, and there's an enthusiastic vote of confidence in the importance of our mission to allow us to expand the work we're doing in connecting our students. Mr. LeDuc is a graduate of the School of Engineering, and to be truthful, we were cultivating him for a gift to engineering. I'm sorry, Dean Beck. But both he and his wife felt that supporting civic engagement was at the heart of their values as people, that their success in their fields. Robert is the CEO of one of the United Technologies companies, and Jean was a long-time emergency room nurse, is really only meaningful insofar as they are engaged in their community. And that is what they want to celebrate and encourage in the next generation. They're both Fall River natives who had humble beginnings, but they really have done very well, and to be this generous with us, we are so grateful. So we will, I do consider it a blessing of this last year of my chancellorship that they put their name, have their name grace this center, because it is really symbolic of the power of what can happen to you with an education and with a commitment to your community. So thank you for participating in today's dialogue. Our university is proud to help foster these discussions, and I know that you will learn something today that will help us to do that. Now I have the task of introducing 3 people, and we are joined here by our 2 mayors of our sister cities, Mayor Flanagan from Fall River and Mayor Mitchell from New Bedford, and we are very grateful for your joining us today, but more importantly because they join and lead our communities to develop a stronger civic fabric. You know, in today's media culture with the 24/7 news cycle, talk radio, Twitter, I mean, I hear about something I said, you know, like 3 minutes after I say it. It elevates sometimes entertainment at the expense of reason and reflection. It's made civic engagement and civic leadership certainly more difficult. So placing one's name on the ballot is the ultimate in civic engagement. And I can't think of a tougher job in civic life than being a mayor. There's no place you go that somebody doesn't talk to you about snow removal or any kind of thing you can think of. So let me thank both Mayor Flanagan and Mayor Mitchell and all of our elected officials who are in attendance for their willingness to lead. They have stepped up to the plate to make civic engagement the center of their life. So we're going to ask Mayor Flanagan first because he's going to go to another event right after this. I want to make sure nobody thinks this is favoring Fall River an event because I'll be in deep trouble after this. But we're proud of all the accomplishments that Mayor Flanagan has had in his first term, and he's in his second term now, and he is a proud alumni of UMass-Dartmouth. Mayor Flanagan.
Chancellor McCormick, thank you very much, and I had an opportunity to be at the Venus de Milo yesterday for the Center for Policy, Marketing and Analysis, and want to also preface my remarks on what I said yesterday. University is really losing one of its guiding lights, and Chancellor McCormick was my chancellor when I attended the University of Massachusetts-Dartmouth. And the incoming chancellor really has big shoes to fill, and I truly believe that this university would not be as accomplished as it is today without Chancellor McCormick's guidance. So, Chancellor, thank you for all that you have done. It's also refreshing to see the president here of the university, as well as the mayor of New Bedford. And they understand, like all of us, the importance of civic engagement. You know, as a mayor of a city of approximately 90,000 people, it's always trying to find the ways to get community involved in improving the quality of life for the entire citizenry. And whether it's from economic development to education to public safety, the only way you really make a true difference in all of those quality of life issues is through having your citizens involved in shaping and changing the quality of life for the people of the community. And as the mayor of the city, I've always tried to be as innovative as possible in engaging our citizens. We've established an Office of Community Outreach to go out into the community and work with the community and the neighborhoods throughout the city to let them know and to always remind them that they have a stake in each other and a stake in improving the quality of life for each other. And over the last 2 to 3 years, Fall River has really accomplished some remarkable things. You know, every day the citizenry continues to amaze me on how they care for each other, and during especially times of tragedy, that they always rise to the occasion to ensure those being affected have a shoulder to lean on. And just even over the last 3 years, I'm just thinking about instances where the community has really risen up to help people. You know, I think of the time where we've had local Floridites who have gone overseas to war and who have been killed in action. And there's a family grieving within the community who has just lost their loved one. And I've always seen how the community had always came together to support that family in their deepest and darkest hours. You know, we've got instances going on right now in the city of Fall River where you're doing food drives and clothing drives and cereal drives to make sure that those who are without food have an opportunity to put food on their table. And when it comes to instances like public safety, the community really has banded together to send a voice to the criminal element that their practices are not going to be tolerated in the city. And from neighborhood groups to neighborhood watch groups, the community has really come together in ways that typically it doesn't. You know, the Chancellor touched upon something I think that's very important, that given today's technology age, it's very easy to lose track of that personal touch. And sometimes you don't even know who your next door neighbor is, and you don't even talk to that person. And I think that's something that can be detrimental to a neighborhood or to a community. And when you get to know who your neighbor is, when you take a stake in their quality of life, you really come together as a neighborhood and you become a stronger unit in that neighborhood. And as these neighborhoods become stronger, the units become stronger, they have a louder voice and more gets done within that particular neighborhood. And I see it firsthand as the mayor of the city. Fall River currently has very active neighborhood groups in our community. And when it comes to a pothole getting fixed or a street light out, or that community or that neighborhood needs something that they may be lacking, they come together as a group and they're civically engaged within their community. And that's very important. Without the civic engagement, without the buy-in from the community, I don't believe communities are going to move forward. And to hear all the volunteer hours that this civic engagement was created here at UMass, all the volunteer hours that you have accomplished, whether it's Fall River, Bedford, or any other of the surrounding towns, really has made a difference in the lives of the people or in the agencies you have volunteered for. I can go back to a time where I would volunteer here on campus, working with groups or agencies. And even though you may not think your volunteerism is important or is really changing the lives or the policy that you're engaged with, I believe it is. Because one of the things I've always noticed, you're dealing with people on a day-to-day basis. And although the issue you may be dealing with may be low on the priority scale of what you're engulfed with on a day-to-day basis, it may be the important thing occurring in that person's life at that given time. So for you to be engaged, for you to be volunteering, for this center to exist on the campus really speaks volumes of the work that UMass-Dartmouth is doing. And it seems every time I come on this campus, there's always something new. I don't remember that big wind turbine being there when I was here. So I'm always proud of this university and the work that it does and the students that it graduates. And I just want to say that as the mayor of the city of Fall River, I have truly recognized all the volunteerism that has been engaged here with the university, and I just want to say thank you for it. Thank you.
Make a difference, and from the first day of his time in office, he has invited all of us in the community to participate with him in facing the challenges that we face. He's particularly been determined to help us address this challenge of education in the community. So, John, I'm delighted to have you here.
Gene, thank you very much. You're inviting the Mayor of Fall River up first. Won't be taken on my part. It's a slight. Flanagan comes before Mitchell alphabetically. Dr. Grossman has big shoes to fill. You've done so much for our city over the last 12 years, is it 10 years, 11 years? 13. Close, 13 years counting, right? I know we'll continue to do that in the years ahead, and I can't thank you enough. This won't be the last time I thank you. I'll keep going, I'll keep gushing until you're out the door. Let me also say thanks to Mayor Flanagan, as well as Bob Correct. It's great to see you, Bob, and great to see you down here on the South Coast especially. We've had some meetings already, really productive meetings, and it's really exciting to have a president of the UMass system that is familiar with this part of the state, not only geographically, but also is very familiar with our needs. And Bob has been a great partner already, and I look forward to a great partnership to continue. I'm really pleased that the nature of this event. When it comes to civic engagement, we can't focus enough on it. Civic engagement, what civic engagement means to me is building bridges among people, of engaging other people, of building trust, ultimately. That's what it's about. And with trust, societies, with greater trust, societies can do big things. They can defend themselves, they can feed the poor, they can school children, they can do all of the things that require collective action. You know, we'll never solve all of our problems, but the task really is to solve each one that comes up, and we can only do that if we have a little bit of understanding and trust among one another. You know, for me, it's really about, you know, building civic engagement, building trust is about reciprocity, engagement so that others engage and so that others don't disengage. I think the person who said it best in my mind was Yogi Berra when he said that if you don't go to someone's funeral, they won't come to yours. And that kind of sums it up, right? In its own inevitable way. You know, the idea really is that, look, I mean, if we stay engaged, if we extend ourselves a little bit, other people will extend themselves, and then we can work together. And it can come in many forms. The trends in the United States are troubling. We've been watching over many years, those of us who are old enough, especially people who are a little bit older, you know, the decline of civic institutions. You know, this is a story that's, you know, well told now. People don't vote like they used to, they don't go to church like they used to, they don't join clubs in ways that they used to, they don't join the military in ways that they used to. People, to use the the catchphrase, people bowl alone. And you know, there's something troubling about that, but you know, like everything else, there's something that we can do about it. I'm reminded in this way of, you know, for those of you, I don't sound too academic, but I'm here at the university, so why not? You know, reminded of that, of George Orwell's essay, Politics in the English Language. And he starts off by saying, you know, the English language is in a bad way these days. People are not using the proper syntax, the proper grammar, and you know, what are we going to do about it? And then he likens it to politics, right? It's the idea that, you know, if you treat politics like the weather, politics and civic engagement like the weather, like you can't do anything about it, then it won't change, right? But if you agree to, if you buy into the premise that you have the power to make a difference, just by engaging, by extending yourself a little bit, then others will do the same, and then things will happen. And that's sort of the idea here. You know, and we need to do it. If people are engaged, you know, people won't report crimes to the police as they should, and then we'll become less safe. If parents don't engage in schools, then our children will be less educated. We will have a less educated society as a result. You know, when people don't vote, we won't get the leaders that we think we expect. And when people don't extend themselves to help others in needs, I think we all are slightly diminished, and we don't want a society like that. So I am pleased to say that in New Bedford, and I'm very proud to say in New Bedford, I think we do better in the social capital scale than most cities. People do reach out in times of need. I've only been in office for a few months, but I've seen it firsthand. We've had, in my first few weeks of office, 2 really tragic deaths of children. A 17-year-old football captain who died in a car accident on his way to school, and a suicide of a 12-year-old boy, a 6th grader. And both tragic incidents in their own right for different reasons. But in both instances, the community stepped up in a huge way. People supported the families. People supported other students. People went out of their way and continued months afterward to go up to support those closest to those 2 boys. That, to me, spoke a lot, spoke volumes about our community. But we can always do better. And I look forward to being part of it. Government does play a part in civic engagement. The government isn't a substitute for private civic engagement. We don't want to crowd it out, but we also want to make sure that we're there to support. And that's what I'm prepared to do, and encourage civic engagement in any way. And I think I would say this, one of the things that I would urge children to do, and all of us to do, is to avoid the temptation of being spectators. When we talk about people who don't, declining voting, declining church attendance, declining civic engagement, it's really about people choosing to become spectators. So let's make a decision not to be spectators. Let's make a decision to get ourselves plugged in and stay plugged in. However small the activity is, whatever the cost, let's just make a commitment to continue to do that, to stay engaged. And I think big things will happen over time. And I look forward to working with all of you in those efforts. Thank you very much.
I thank the mayors for both being here. I've enjoyed getting to know them, and I look forward to continue to work with them. I have my entire career, which as an administrator began in 1981 as a science dean, have been focused externally. And part of the reason for that was, as I was asked to become a dean, as an acting dean, I actually was thinking about becoming an industrial chemist. I had just spent 13 months at McCormick Spices, which has their headquarters and R&D facilities in Baltimore. They had been recruiting me for several years to come to work for them. I took a sabbatical to go try it. Did some of the most interesting research in my life on flavor and fragrance chemistry, because before that point in time, my research was a little bit more esoteric than that. And was about to take a job with them when I was offered the deanship. And had just, as I said, come off this great industrial experience. So I go into the dean's office. The dean had been a dean for 13 years. He was a physicist. I'm a chemist. I sat at his desk. This is before technology, so there were no laptops. And he had manila folders. And one of the manila folders said industrial contacts. And I opened it up eagerly, and it said, none to speak of at this time. And it said, I think, a lot about how universities behave. Because there was no reason why a science college with maybe 3,000 majors in it in a major metropolitan area with huge Fortune 200 companies, after a 13-year deanship, and I like this guy a lot, should have no contact with the business community. And in many ways, the institution, if it has that philosophy, will have no contact with any of the communities that it is part of. So I immediately created an industrial academic advisory board, which still exists at Towson today. And began the outreach. I put an op-ed about that same period in the Baltimore Sun, and in that op-ed, and I can't remember the exact wording, but it was basically something that said, if we don't dream with our community doesn't care what happens to us. But if you and the community dream together, then if somebody tinkers with your dream, they're tinkering with the community's dream, and the community will rise to protect you. And I think that's a big part of what, as institutions, we need to do, but also as a society we need to do, because we're interlinked. And if we're not interlinked, we will crumble. I gave a talk back at San Jose State. I was president there from 95 to 2003, and we had a pretty well-developed center called the Institute for Social Responsibility. And I gave a keynote there sometime in the late 90s. And part of my talk this morning takes excerpts from some of the history I went through at that period, talking about our role in terms of civic engagement and social responsibility. I did a lot of reading when I first became an administrator, because up to that point I hadn't really studied the history. I didn't get a degree in higher ed administration. I really did not, other than a very, very thin sense, understand the history of higher education. So I did a lot of reading about the history of higher education and how we evolved, not only in this country, but from the institutions in Europe, and what were the foundations, what were the tenets on which we evolved and grew ourselves. And I'm just going to give a few quotes here, which take us back a little bit through history. And we go all the way back to Plato, who really sort of is credited with creating the first university that is known. And his quote was, if you ask what is good of education, the answer is easy. Education makes good men, and good men act nobly. And right from the beginning of time, you find this tenet that universities were created to create a better society by creating leaders and educated citizens. And you can see it very much in this country if you go back to when Harvard and the original 13 colonies, the original 13 universities were founded, mostly the Ivies. But if you look at the history of those institutions, you see that same theme throughout. They were looking at educating the leadership of the future so that the society would continue to thrive and the democracy would continue to thrive. And at that time, the leadership was largely the aristocracy and the clergy. But over the years, as we've gone through any number of periods, through the GI Bill, the Land Grant Moral Act, the turmoil and social upheaval of the 60s, which opened up education to broader and broader groups of individuals, that leadership role began to permeate all of us. And not just the pure leaders that were going to be the elected officials that led this country. There was a reformist, Frederick Howe. I'm sure many of you in the room have read his works over the years. He was involved in a whole series of things at the turn of the century. And his quote, which I always enjoyed, is putting men, it was only men in those days, evidently in universities, there weren't a lot of women yet, putting men to work in the service of society. The role of the university, he felt, was to put men, and of course today women, to work in service to society. And then when you get to one of the things I've always been interested in, because the original institutions in this country were aimed at providing a traditional arts and science-based education, and from that, leadership. But then we became almost immediately more workforce focused, which means we didn't abandon the arts and science base, but we began to focus more on professional needs also. And one of the first institutions to do that were Johns Hopkins and Cornell. There were a whole series of institutions that came into being that were really looking more at the model of service to society, but also providing the workers that would drive that society. And Ezra Cornell, who was the co-founder of Western Union and founded Cornell University, said as that institution was coming into being, that the role of that institution was to turn out men who would become leaders of the nation. And he said that the university should devote part of its energy to investigating the social problems that mark the nation's pretensions to be a progressive and enlightened people. So again, you see that same theme coming out a century later, in terms of centuries later, in terms of what we should be doing. And finally, more recently, Derek Bach, former president of Harvard University, in one of his books, Advanced Training, he talked about advanced training and specialized knowledge and scientific discovery, the things that were happening at Harvard and in all of our institutions. And he felt we had abandoned using all that knowledge to serve society's problems today, and really pushed forward in his book back around, I guess around the year 2000, that we needed to take the energy, the knowledge, the expertise on our campuses and take it out of the walls of the campus and aim it at solving social and practical problems in society. The third one that is really important that we know about but society sometimes doesn't recognize is the social well-being. And I push that all the time in all three of my presidencies, that we need to be aggressive as public institutions in particular in all three of those arenas to make our society, the community around us, a better place to be. As we move forward, I just see doing more and more of what we're doing. What I would like to see, one of the problems we have as a society, and I'm not sure how we overcome this because it involves thermodynamics, is that for those of you that understand the laws of entropy, entropy says that the world will tend to disorder. So if you look at your desk, your house, your car trunk, you understand that entropy is generally winning. And again, as I look back now through my passage in my 60s, I'm even more convinced that there's no way we're going to beat entropy. But the more we can focus ourselves on a day-to-day basis, the more the chance is that we can actually do something that becomes systemic in our campuses. Not just a hobby, not just something we do because we got a grant for 3 months or 3 years. Not something we do because one individual believes in it, and until he or she dies or leaves, it goes well, but as soon as he or she dies or leaves, it stops. To take something and make it systemic to our campuses so that it is something that we live and breathe, and that is one of the outcomes we expect from an educated individual at UMass-Dartmouth or UMass Lowell or UMass Boston or Worcester or whichever one I missed in the file. And so I intend to continue to work moving forward to make sure that happens with this kind of an initiative. I'm not here today just because you invited me. I'm here today because you invited me, and I believe in what you are all doing. And I realize how difficult it can be to do because there are so many other pressing needs around us. But I do believe this is one of the critical things that we as educators need to do to make our education outcomes successful. We need to take on this role of anchor institutions, institutions that revitalize our community, that are the core institutions that people look to make their communities educationally, economically, and socially viable. When I met the mayor the first time, that we talked for a couple of hours, and he was sharing his vision of what he sees in downtown New Bedford, on the waterfront, in the middle of the city, and the refurbishment that can go on there, modeling after what's happening at the Marine Science Facility, what's happening at the UMass facility, but what we could do more together. And I'm a real believer in what he wants. Again, using my Towson experience, I was in the middle of Towson, which is the county seat of Baltimore County, a reasonably large subdivision of Baltimore. And I had a 320-acre campus. One of the first things we did, and we just opened it, was to lease almost an entire building about a mile from the campus, but on the main street, so that we had 2 anchors to the downtown. And then we rented space in between those two, so that we began, as you are doing here at UMass-Dartmouth, reaching out into the city more to help the city recognize how important we were, but also to help the city achieve what it needed to do. And I can tell you, in those cases, it was county government, but the county embraced us very aggressively because they need the help, just as we need them. And together we can make those kind of things happen. Let me end with saying that, summarizing a little bit of sort of the philosophy I think I just put before you. We're preparing students for life. We're preparing students to go off and lead this society as the original founders of this society believed we should. We're doing that today in a different context. But at the fundamental level, we still need leaders who understand that they are there to serve not only themselves and their families, but to serve the society as a whole. And we are beginning to lose that, I think, dramatically. And I don't know if we're going to be successful in turning that around, but I think we can have a huge impact in helping to turn that around. We want to be positive forces in the world, not negative forces in the world. We want to be viewed as institutions that provide the foundation for the future, not just the foundation for the past. And we need to be viewed as institutions that care about what's going on today and not just care about ourselves. We're often viewed as being too isolated today, being too involved internally in terms of our self-aggrandizement and our own reputations. And I believe as public institutions, the more we can do to prove that that's not what we're here and what we're all about, the more important we will become to the society we serve. Education is not complete until students have not only acquired knowledge, but can act on that knowledge in the world. Let me end with the Frederick Howard quote again. Today, we need to put men and women to work in the service of society. That's what we're here to do. And if we dream together, we will continue to work together and dream together into the future, and the society will be better for it. So again, I applaud you for what you're doing. I encourage you to keep doing it. I encourage you to keep trying to find the resources to make it systemic, find leadership that will help you make it systemic. I think the new chancellor, as has been mentioned, as a vice president for engagement, if she's not involved in this, we're going to have a real problem because she's been doing the wrong job for the last 8 years. But I think she's going to be a great advocate for engagement here on the campus and in the region, and we look forward to having her work with Gene during the transition and take this to the next level here at the University of Massachusetts, Dartmouth. Thanks again for having me here today.
We are running a little bit late, but let's take a 10-minute break and then we'll...
John Ryan.
Report of what we've been doing.
We're working preschool, prenatal, college readiness, and it's a full spectrum of social work. Every one of the colleges is involved in 6 hours, but they're all building it into their scholarship.
You know, like with my husband, they would bring I would
Please find your seats again. I have the pleasure of introducing the Assistant Director of the Center for Civic Engagement, Deirdre Healy, who will then introduce our next keynote speaker. Deirdre?
Hi, good morning. Great to see everyone here. And it is such a pleasure for me to introduce to you Shirley Segala, who many know as I want to say the, but her book says a founding mother of the modern service movement in the United States. Among her many accomplishments, Shirley Sagawa drafted the original legislation that started the AmeriCorps program and the Corporation for National Service. She then went on to be the first managing director of the corporation. She is the founding director of Learn First, a Partnership for Education Association, and she is currently serving as chief counsel for the youth policy for the Senate Labor Committee and senior counsel to the Women's Law Center and deputy chief of staff, or she was deputy chief of staff for Lady Hillary. Welcome our distinguished guest, Ms. Shirley Sagawa.
I'm thrilled to be here. I actually began my career in Massachusetts, working for Senator Kennedy in Washington, but representing Massachusetts in every way I could, and I have a great fondness for the state because there is such civic spirit here. So although it is some, I find often when I'm at conferences like this, people kind of want to go, they want to knock their head and bemoan there's not enough civic engagement, we're all bowling alone and all this. But really, there is a lot of great things happening, and people do want to be involved, and we are a nation of volunteers. We are. It is absolutely the case that this country was founded on that spirit. That's a picture of the first volunteer fire department. But, that was how we solved most of our social problems beginning, before there was a United States. And up until recently, there has been a tremendous, amount of effort. Actually, one of my favorite volunteer programs, which is not really a social program, but I always get such a kick out of thinking about this, is Wikipedia. How many of you have ever used Wikipedia? I know you're like a university audience, so you're like, man, Wikipedia. But come on, we all do it. And Wikipedia is amazing because there are more than 300 million people a month go on Wikipedia, right? And it operates in 30 languages around the world. There are more than 30, there's probably more like 30 million articles now. These statistics are a little old, but more than 13 million articles. And who puts this out? There's 35 staff and 3 million volunteers. So when people say nobody wants to volunteer, that's not true. They're just volunteering in different ways. And so that's a theme I kind of want to keep in my head. I do think the spirit of service is very much alive. I actually think about this generation of young people who are in college and just getting out really as the service generation. It's in their bones. They grew up doing service in school, in high school. They had service learning experiences. They volunteered. When they applied to go to your august institutions, you probably asked them, if you're like most colleges, what's your community service record? And so they knew that they had to answer that question, and they thought about it deeply, at least once. And then they come to your universities and they have opportunities to serve. And now, AmeriCorps, which has only 82,000 positions available, this year has gotten 582,000 applications. So this is the service generation. And yet we need to figure out how to take advantage of this amazing spirit and commitment that these young people have. And we need to do it now. Because we are a nation of tremendous challenges. And I work in Washington. So people in Washington tend to have a very government-centric view of the world. And it's in two ways. You either are thinking, we need a government program for that, or you're thinking, there's too much government and that's the problem. And I'm one of those people who kind of wants to be in the middle because I think sometimes we do have too much government. And sometimes government does need to get out of the way. But gosh, if we used government in the right way, and I'll come back to this later, boy, we could actually put a huge amount of human resources towards solving problems in a much more productive way than I think we are now in most cases. So, we've got natural disasters tend to draw everybody out. Everybody wants to help after there's a flood or a tornado. How do we capture that and make good use of it? But at the same time, we have so many people in prison today that, California is letting people out because they have no more space. And we have to really be rethinking how we as a society, use criminal justice and make people able to reclaim their lives and be good citizens and not have their lives ruined and be a drag on society forever. And we've got young people dropping out still in droves. 1 million young people a year are dropping out of school, and that's just not acceptable at a time when we have jobs going unfilled because we don't have enough skilled people. And it's certainly the human cost of having anybody feel that it's not worthwhile to continue their education is a cost that we as a country shouldn't want to bear. And the thing that's amazing is we have solutions to these problems. We just don't try to do them on any scale. So there are all these wonderful little niche programs that are solving a little tiny piece of the problem in about 2 or 3 places or 1 place, and we're not doing it in a big way, and we're not sharing the information that we have about how to do it better. So that's why I decided to write this book, The American Way to Change, because I believe that the solutions are there and that we need to share them, and that so many of the solutions have volunteers at the center. So here's a picture of Hands On New Orleans, which grew up in the wake of Hurricane Katrina, because so many people were saying, I'm getting on a bus and I'm going down there. And if you all know that if you just show up, sometimes that's not maybe the most productive thing. So they set up an organization in partnership with a church where they would host the busloads of spring breakers and the busloads of church volunteers and the busloads of everybody else who would show up, and they had a place for them to stay. I visited this bunk. It was, you walk through the space between the beds is about, if I gained 5 pounds eating New Orleans food, I would not have fit through these spaces because they wanted to get so many people in there. And they have been there for years, managing as volunteers, mucking out people's houses, making them livable again. And if you go back to New Orleans now, you'll see it is a recovering place. There's hope. And in the early days, what they did actually was take the volunteer jobs of the people who had lived in New Orleans and had fled, yet the problems were still all there. And so they took up and did many of those things, and then they moved into kind of recovering housing. And it's still one of the most robust sites in the country. And here's another program I love, Prison Entrepreneurship Project, which is in Texas. And it was started by a woman who had an MBA and a deep Christian faith, and she just decided that she would leave Wall Street and she would go visit prisons. And what she learned there was people in prison are kind of entrepreneurial. If you're selling drugs, you kind of get supply and demand, and and there's a lot of people in prison who really have potential, and yet we're going to send them out and just let them not be able to get jobs, basically, because there's so many barriers to somebody who has spent time in prison. So she created this program that would basically teach an MBA-level course to the people who were in prison before they got out, so that when they left, they could actually start their own businesses. And she did that with volunteers who had MBAs, who were successful business people, who would go into the prisons and teach folks how to fish, right? How to fish legally. And guess what? The other benefit is that people who actually have been in prison are so much more likely to hire other people who are ex-offenders. So it solves kind of 2 problems at the same time. This program is largely volunteer run and largely volunteer provided, and it's saving the state of Texas a lot of money. It's saving, their study shows that they're saving $50,000 per graduate, that the return on investment to the donors is $10 to 1, that the graduates are paying taxes instead of going back to prison at a cost of over $20,000 a year. And so they're making progress, but you know what? They still, they've only served 700 people. So, against the millions of Americans who are in prison, just a drop in the bucket. So you will find that, people will do things as volunteers that they would never do if it was a job. So if you want, somebody to mentor a young person, if you went to the local lawyer or business person or, woman who owns a successful local business and said, I'd like to pay you to go mentor this kid, they would be insulted and they wouldn't do it. They say, I already have a job. But if you went and said, would you do this for free? They're going to do it as a volunteer. So, it actually has that kind of power. And I've worked with about 22 of the city's that are the most successful have university partnerships as a critical part of what they're doing. And it's not always just student survey. They may have a research part of the university helping to develop the metrics and create systems to measure the results. That's something that City Hall is not great at, but universities are really good at. And so those partnerships have been tremendously important in Orlando and in Sacramento. We've seen the facilities. One thing universities and colleges have are facilities, and that's just very useful for the mayors who are trying to do kind of large-scale programming. That's in Omaha. Creighton's working really closely with the mayor there. I mean, I can give you lots of examples, but it's important to kind of think about if we want these two mayors who kind of stuck their neck out and came here and talked and signed the declaration to be successful, how can we help them figure this out? Because it isn't completely easy all the time to kind of figure out easy ways to solve problems. Cities of Service has put together a set of blueprints for initiatives that are evidence-based and that they're trying to get resources behind. So if you go to their website, you will see some of the opportunities there. And the folks in New York at the Bloomberg Philanthropies are continuing to support this initiative, so keep your eye on it. I think that you'll see more later. We've got this, what I've called the service generation, graduating from college and wanting to serve. We are now also seeing a decline in service learning at the high school level. So, and where there are the fewest service opportunities are in those disadvantaged communities where this could be a real lifeline for kids to change their orientation to themselves and the world. So I urge you to not just exercise your service muscles, but also your political muscles as individuals or as organizations to the extent that you can, to kind of send the word to Washington that a little bit of money can leverage a whole lot of human capital, and we can make a dent against these problems that they're all wringing their hands against. So I will stop here, and I will be happy to answer questions.
And I would like to confer upon Dennis Kelly, who is described in your program. And we were just joking because Dennis recently retired from the bank. And we have here the chairman of the board, Dennis Cody. We have his wife, Michelle, because Dennis has always modeled that what's good for business is to be engaged in your community, but what's good for you is to give back to your community. And so I would like to honor Dennis and tell you a little bit about him. We were just saying it at his retirement event. We shared this feeling of being at our own wake. But they taped 7 hours of video of people saying things, and they've been enjoying the fun of some of the uncensored parts of the video that didn't get shown when we had the event at Gillette Stadium. So could I ask Dennis to come up and show you? After 18 years piloting the Bristol County Savings Bank, you retire as the most influential president in its 166-year history. Leading employees by splendid example, you fully embraced volunteerism. From the Boy Scouts to the boards of hospitals, colleges, and charitable organizations, you have practiced your belief that people are the bank's most important asset. A passionate advocate for education, you have worked tirelessly to support educational endeavors at all levels, elementary through college. So with immense gratitude for the profound impact you have had on the region's organizations, schools, families, and individuals, the University of Massachusetts-Dartmouth honors you with the Chancellor's Distinguished Service Medal on this 26th day of April in the year 2012.
The reason why we have the LEADS program today, which teaches leadership to middle school kids through community service projects. So that program, which is very important to us in terms of instilling the value of community service and leadership to our youth, would not exist without their generosity. So thank you very much. We're now at the stage in the program where we have to kind of do a little bit of juggling and whatnot. The food service folks are going to try and clean up as best they can, and then we're going to place on 9 tables around the room the numbers 1 through 9. If you look in your program, there are breakout sessions, best practices and partnerships scheduled for this time frame, and we're going to allow you the opportunity to attend 2 of those. So you will meet in a round table discussing one of them for about a half hour, and then we'll do a quick flip, and then maybe go through another one. So it gives you the chance to be exposed to 2 topics in depth.
We hadn't even heard of it.
Enjoy job. Sure, $5. $5, sure. How you doing? 7.
I'm Kesa. Nice to meet you.
John Quinn. I'm going to be the facilitator. I'm for this purpose of this, a professor at the law school, and I teach a field placement course, which is a big part of the experiential learning.
Community has network area, and we are number 8 with our
Our organization is a community development corporation that has been around since the late 90s, and we kind of started off with a philosophy around looking at assets